Grant Holloway's voice carried across the restaurant like he wanted it to. "And this is Evelyn." A pause calculated and cruel. "She works reception somewhere downtown." He said it with that half smile she remembered too well, the one that always arrived just before he said something designed to make her feel small. His fiancée, Celeste Whitmore, stood beside him in a white dress that probably cost more than Evelyn's monthly rent, and the diamond on her finger was catching every chandelier in the room. Evelyn felt her jaw tighten. She was a paralegal at one of the most respected law firms in Manhattan. She had been studying for the bar exam for 2 years, on 4 hours of sleep a night. She had not spoken to this man in 3 years, and the first thing he chose to do when he saw her was reduce her to a receptionist in front of strangers. She opened her mouth, and that was the moment a hand settled against the small of her back. Warm, steady, like it had always belonged there. "There you are." The voice was low, calm, and carried the quiet authority of someone who had never once needed to raise it. "I was starting to think you left without me." Evelyn turned. She had never seen this man before in her life. He was looking at Grant now, and something in his expression made the air in the room feel different, heavier, somehow, like the temperature had dropped 3 degrees without anyone touching a thermostat. Then he looked at her. "I'm sorry I'm late, Tesoro." He kissed her. Not a peck, not a stage performance. A real kiss, unhurried and deliberate, in front of Grant Holloway and his diamond ring fiancée and every person standing within 30 feet of them. The restaurant went quiet, and Evelyn Hartwell, paralegal, bar exam candidate, woman who had promised herself she would not cry tonight, stood there in her emerald green dress and decided that whatever happened next, it could not possibly be worse than what had just been happening before. She was wrong about that, of course. It was going to be considerably more complicated. But it was also going to change everything. If you're watching this for the first time, hit that subscribe button right now because this story is just getting started, and trust me, you do not want to miss a single moment of what comes next. Tap the like button if you already feel something, and drop a comment telling me what city or country you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let's get into it. The evening had started badly before Grant Holloway even walked through the door. Evelyn had known it was going to be uncomfortable the moment her cousin Dana called 3 weeks ago to announce her engagement dinner and mentioned almost as an afterthought, in that breezy tone she used when delivering information she knew would land wrong, that Marcus, her fiancé, had a few business associates coming. "Nothing formal," Dana said. "You know how Marcus is. He just likes mixing things." Evelyn had said that was fine. She had meant it at the time. What Dana neglected to mention was that Marcus's business circle apparently included her ex-boyfriend. She found out from Dana's younger sister, Bree, who texted her 2 hours before the dinner with a message that read, "Girl, Grant Holloway is on the guest list. Just thought you should know." "You okay?" Evelyn had stared at her phone for a long time. Then she put on the emerald green dress she'd bought 6 months ago and never worn, because it was the kind of dress that said, "I am not thinking about you at all." And she went. That was her first mistake. The restaurant was the kind of place where the lighting did all the heavy lifting low and amber warm, the kind that made everyone look slightly better than they were. Round tables with white linens, candles that were actually real. A wine list that didn't have prices printed next to anything, because the people who came here already knew they were paying whatever the server said they were paying. Evelyn had been to nicer places. Not many, but a few, through work events where she stood near the partner-level attorneys and tried to absorb the vocabulary of people who moved through expensive rooms without thinking twice about it. She wasn't uncomfortable here. She just noticed it. There was a difference. Dana spotted her near the entry and pulled her into a hug that smelled like expensive perfume and nervous energy. "You look gorgeous," Dana said, pulling back to look at her. "Seriously, that color." "Thank you for the warning," Evelyn said. Dana had the grace to look slightly guilty. "I only found out this week. Marcus swears he didn't know it would be a thing." "Is it going to be a thing?" "It's going to be fine." Grant's engaged. You've both moved on. It's adults at a dinner table. Evelyn took a glass of white wine from a passing tray and said nothing, Because Dana was not entirely wrong and also not entirely right, and some conversations were not worth starting at a party. The room filled in around her. She found a pocket of space near the far windows, where city lights pressed against the glass, and she could watch the room without being directly in its center. That was how she preferred to enter any room she wasn't sure about, from the edges, where you could see everything before you had to engage with any of it. She saw Grant before he saw her. He came in with Celeste on his arm, and Evelyn's first honest thought was that they looked exactly like what they were, two people who had constructed themselves very carefully for other people's benefit. Grant had always been handsome in that deliberate way, the kind where you sensed effort underneath the ease. Dark suit, no tie, that particular haircut that cost twice what it looked like it cost. Celeste was taller than Evelyn expected, with the kind of posture that came from years of being looked at and deciding to lean into it rather than away. The diamond was real, and it was significant. Evelyn clocked it from across the room. She took a quiet breath. "You are fine. You are a paralegal at Merritt, Caldwell and Associates. You have been studying civil procedure on 4 hours of sleep. You have nothing to prove to this man or his fiancée or anyone else in this room. You are fine." She almost believed it. Then Grant's eyes found her across the room, and the thing she'd been dreading happened, not the recognition, but the expression that followed it. The small, involuntary adjustment of his posture. The stammered, the flicker of something she remembered too well, because she had spent 18 months inside a relationship with a man who occasionally made her feel like a thing to be managed rather than a person to be known. He crossed the room toward her, pulling Celeste with him, and Evelyn stayed where she was, because moving would have looked like retreat. "Evelyn." He said her name like it was a pleasantry, low effort and symmetrical. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Dana's my cousin," she said. "I've known Marcus since they started dating." Right. He was already turning, folding Celeste forward in the introduction with the smooth, practiced movement of a man who had learned that controlling a conversation meant controlling how people were introduced. "Celeste, this is Evelyn. We dated for a while, a few years back." Celeste smiled not unkindly, but with the faint, careful warmth of someone who'd heard this category of story before and had already sorted Evelyn into a box, labeled not a threat, not interesting. "Nice to meet you," Celeste said. "You too," Evelyn said. And then Grant turned slightly, not fully, so that his next words were technically addressed to the couple standing beside them, but delivered in the middle space where anyone could hear them. "She's in, what is it now, Ev? Reception? Downtown somewhere?" The air stopped moving. Evelyn heard it clearly. The way he said Ev, like they were still close. The way he said reception, not like a mistake, not like a guess, but like a statement settled with quiet confidence. Like it was simply the most plausible thing she could be doing with herself. She had worked for Merritt, Caldwell, and Associates for 2.5 years. She had her name listed on 3 different case summaries filed with the New York Supreme Court. She was 14 months into a bar prep program that she paid for herself. Her boss, senior partner Diane Caldwell, had told her 6 months ago that when she passed the exam, there was a conversation to be had about her future at the firm. None of that was in the room right now. What was in the room was the assumption that she had been standing still. Evelyn opened her mouth. She did not know exactly what she was going to say, but she knew it was going to be specific and controlled, and it was going to take the satisfaction of this moment away from him. One careful sentence at a time, and then the hand touched her back. Warm, flat-palmed, the touch of someone who intended it to be felt. "There you are." She turned. He was taller than Grant by several inches, and where Grant's suit was expensive, in a way that announced itself, this man's suit was expensive in the way that made everything else in the room look like it was trying too hard. Black, well-fitted, the kind of fit that didn't come from a rack. He was looking at Grant when he said it, not at her. Grant, with the calm, unhurried attention of someone who had already assessed the situation completely and found it only moderately interesting. "I was starting to think you left without me." Then he looked at her, and something in his expression shifted, not warmer exactly, but more specific, the way a person looks at someone they actually see rather than just observe. And he said quietly, "I'm sorry I'm late, Tesoro." And then he kissed her. Evelyn went completely still. It was not the kind of kiss that was meant to be seen. And that was the thing that made everyone look, because it wasn't performed. It didn't ask for an audience. It just happened. And when he pulled back, his hand was still at her back, and he was looking at her and not at anyone else. She could not have said how long it lasted. 4 seconds, maybe. Long enough. When she turned back toward the rest of the room, Grant's expression had done something interesting. The easy certainty was gone. Not because he was angry, because he was recalculating, and the calculation was not going the way he expected. The stranger extended a hand toward Grant. Ronan Blackwell, just his name. No title, no context, no softening. Grant shook it. Evelyn watched him do it. She also watched his grip adjust mid-shake, the involuntary, unconscious shortening that happened when someone's body registered a social situation differently than their ego intended. "Grant Holloway," Grant said. "Marcus's business associate?" Ronan said. "That's right." Ronan nodded once, said nothing further. The silence lasted 2 seconds and somehow managed to be the loudest thing in the conversation. Celeste said something polite. Ronan responded politely. Evelyn stood inside this moment that was absolutely not hers and thought, "I have never met this man in my life, and he is currently pretending to be in a relationship with me, and I genuinely do not know if I should be terrified or grateful." Terrified one slightly, because underneath the polite surface of the exchange, something was happening that she couldn't entirely read. The way Ronan held the room, the way the 2 servers near the bar had stopped their quiet conversation and gone very carefully still. The way even Grant, who was not an easily impressed man, was standing 2 inches differently than he had been standing before. Ronan touched the small of her back again, just briefly, a light pressure, and leaned slightly toward her. "Walk with me a moment." Not a question. She walked with him. He moved through the restaurant with the kind of ease that came from never once in his adult life having had to wait for a room to make space for him. People simply moved. Not dramatically, they didn't scatter, didn't stare, they just quietly redistributed themselves. The way water moved around something solid. He led her toward the corridor near the coat room, where the ambient noise from the main room dropped to something manageable, and then he stopped and turned toward her and waited. Evelyn looked at him. He was probably 38, maybe 40. Dark hair, a little longer than strictly professional. Eyes that were a shade of brown, that caught light differently depending on how directly you looked at them. There was something in his face that was not quite handsome. In the conventional magazine cover sense, it was more specific than that, more certain of itself, which was either more attractive or more unsettling, depending on how you felt about certainty. She crossed her arms. "I've never seen you before in my life," she said. "No," he agreed. "You haven't. You kissed me." "I did." "I would like an explanation." He was quiet for a moment, not the silence of someone collecting a story, but the silence of someone deciding how much of the truth to give all at once. "I was in that room for about 20 minutes before you came in," he said finally. "Marcus introduced me to a few people. I was across the room when your cousin brought you over to say hello to that man." He didn't say Grant's name. She noticed that. "I heard what he said," Ronan continued. The receptionist line. Evelyn felt her jaw tighten. "You stepped toward him," Ronan said. "You were going to correct him. And then something stopped you. You pulled back, and I could see why. Because you were at a family dinner, and you didn't want to make it into something it wasn't. And he knew that. He knew exactly what he was doing. He said it because he knew you'd calculate the cost of responding and decide it was too high." She said nothing. "That's not a small thing to do to someone," Ronan said. "Using their good behavior against them." Evelyn looked at him for a moment. "So you kissed a stranger. I made a decision. That is a significant decision to make about another person without their consent." Something moved in his expression. Not defensiveness. Closer to acknowledgement. "You're right," he said. It was. She hadn't expected that. She'd expected justification, some version of, "But I helped you," the debt framing that men like this sometimes reached for. She'd had enough years in a law office to know that even genuine assistance could be offered in ways that were fundamentally about the person doing the assisting. He was not doing that. I don't know who you are, she said. Ronan Blackwell, I told you. That's a name. It's not who you are. He studied her. There was something careful in the way he was looking at her. Not cold, not calculating exactly, but deliberate. A sound like green wood splitting, the look of a person who was used to people wanting things from him and was trying to determine whether she was one of them. My company works in international shipping and logistics, he said. I have legitimate business interests that occasionally overlap with Marcus Reyes's import firm. That's how I came to be here tonight. Occasionally overlap, she repeated. That's what I said. There was something underneath the surface of that answer. She could feel it the same way she could feel when a witness in a deposition was technically telling the truth and leaving something important unstated. She filed it away. You put me in a difficult position, she said. You walked into a situation that I was handling. You weren't handling it, he was. The directness of it landed hard. That I was in the process of handling, she continued, because she was not going to let that sentence sit unopposed, and you made a decision on my behalf without asking me. Now I have to go back in there and either maintain a fiction or explain why it collapsed. Those are the only two options you left me, or Ronan said, you could go home. She blinked. You don't owe that room anything, he said. You came for your cousin. Dana looks happy. Marcus looks like a man who knows he's about to give a toast and has been rehearsing it in the mirror. That part of the evening is going to happen whether or not you're in the room. What you actually owe anyone here is nothing. Evelyn thought about that. She thought about Dana, who meant well, but had still managed to put her in a room with the man she'd spent 2 years trying to stop thinking about. She thought about the toast, which she genuinely did want to be present for, because Dana was her family and that part was real. She thought about the look on Grant's face when Ronan said his name back to him. I'm not going home, she said. All right. And I'm not maintaining a fiction for the rest of the evening. Also reasonable. So whatever just happened in there is going to need some kind of adjustment. He nodded slowly. I can tell him I got confused. Mixed up my evenings. Or I can simply be someone you met recently, which is technically accurate. Technically. We met 20 minutes ago. You kissed me. That part, he said, is harder to walk back. It's already in the room. She pressed her lips together. He was not wrong. A thing like that, once it happened, did not unhappen. It became a fact that people organized their other observations around. Fine, she said. Then we say we're seeing each other. Casually. And we leave it at that. And you stay on your side of the room, and at the end of the evening we both go our separate ways, and this never happens again. He considered her for a moment. Then he said, Do you want coffee after? She stared at him. There's a place 2 blocks east, he said. Nothing fancy. I don't know about you, but I've been in this room for 2 hours counting the dinner and the prep time, and I'm not done talking to an actual human being yet. You seem like an actual human being. You kissed me 20 minutes ago, and now you're asking me to coffee. I kissed you to stop a man from making you feel worthless in front of your cousin's engagement party. That's a different category than coffee. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the bar prep notes sitting on her kitchen table. Thought about the deposition summary she still had to proof before Monday morning. She thought about the fact that she had promised herself this would be a 1-hour appearance, show face, hug Dana, survive, leave. She thought about Grant's expression, the one she was going to be carrying home with her either way. 1 hour, she said. Something shifted in Ronan Blackwell's face. Not a smile exactly. Something quieter than that, and more honest. 1 hour, he agreed. They walked back into the dinner together, and Evelyn told herself this was simply damage management, a situation she had not created, but now had to navigate, which was, if she was being honest, most of what lawyering actually was. She told herself that for the remainder of the dinner, which she spent on the opposite side of the room from Grant Holloway, watching Dana laugh at something Marcus said, watching the candlelight catch the diamond on her cousin's finger. Ronan Blackwell sat 2 tables away and did not once try to speak to her across the room. He talked to Marcus's business contacts. He ate dinner. He existed in the room the same way he seemed to exist everywhere, with a completeness that didn't require anyone else's attention to feel total. But once, near the end of the evening, she looked across the room and found him already looking at her. He didn't look away. Neither did she. And Evelyn Hartwell, paralegal, bar exam candidate, woman who had promised herself this was just one uncomfortable dinner and nothing more, thought, for the first time in a very long time, that she had no idea what came next. She was surprised to find she didn't entirely mind. The coffee shop was called Marin's, and it was the kind of place that had been on the same corner for 30 years, without ever trying to be anything other than what it was: mismatched chairs. Counter that had been wiped down so many times the finish was gone in 3 long stripes, and a menu board written in chalk that hadn't been fully erased and rewritten since some time in the previous decade. Evelyn picked it because she knew it. She had studied here on Saturday mornings for the past 14 months in the back corner booth where the light came in at the right angle and nobody bothered her. It was her place, which meant she was the one with the advantage, which mattered more than she would have admitted out loud. Ronan sat across from her and looked at the laminated menu like a man who had not read a laminated menu in a very long time. "Coffee is actually good," she said. "Don't let the room fool you." "The room isn't fooling me," he said. "I like it." She wasn't sure she believed him. Then she watched him set the menu flat on the table, look around once with the same quiet attention he'd used in the restaurant cataloging exits. She would later realize, though she didn't know that yet, and settle back in his chair like a man who had made a decision to be comfortable and was following through on it. She ordered black coffee. He ordered the same. The server, a woman named Cora, who had seen Evelyn in here enough times to know her order before she gave it, raised an eyebrow at Ronan and wrote nothing down, which meant she'd remember it anyway. When Cora left, Evelyn folded her hands on the table. "You said your company is shipping and logistics," she said. "That's right. Marcus Reyes imports specialty goods. Furniture, textiles, a few food products from Southeast Asia." "That's a narrow overlap." Ronan looked at her steadily. "You've met Marcus before tonight. Dana's been with him for 2 years. I've been paying attention." "Why?" "Because she's my family," Evelyn said. "And I didn't know anything about him when they started dating, and that felt like something worth correcting." Something in his expression shifted, not surprise exactly, but a kind of recognition, like she'd said something that confirmed a calculation he'd already made. "His import logistics move through 3 freight carriers," Ronan said. "My company manages compliance and customs facilitation for 2 of them. It's not glamorous work, but it's consistent." "Compliance and customs facilitation," she repeated. "Is that a legal question?" "It's a clarifying question." "The answer is that it's exactly what it sounds like," he said. "Documents, tariff classifications, port authority coordination. Paperwork, essentially at a scale that requires infrastructure." Cora set their coffees down. Evelyn wrapped both hands around hers. "You're very good at giving accurate answers that don't tell you much," she said. Ronan looked at her for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, the corner of his mouth moved. "You'd be a good interrogator," he said. "I'm going to be a lawyer." "I know. You told Grant you were studying for the bar." "I didn't tell Grant anything," she said. "I was about to, and then you arrived." "You would have told him." "Yes." "Would it have mattered?" She looked down at her coffee. That was the question that had been sitting in her chest since the restaurant, the one she hadn't wanted to examine too directly. Whether correcting Grant would have mattered. Whether landing the truth accurately in a room full of people would have done anything except make her feel momentarily righteous and leave her driving home with the same hollow feeling she'd been trying to outpace for 3 years. "Probably not," she said. "Then I saved you a sentence. You cost me a whole different set of problems." "What problems?" "He's going to tell people we're together." "Good." "It's not good," she said. "It's a lie. And lies have the very inconvenient quality of requiring maintenance. Only if you intend to stay in proximity to the person who believes them," Ronan said. "Are you planning to spend a significant amount of time around Grant Holloway?" "No." "Then the lie expires on its own. You don't have to do anything." She looked at him. He wasn't wrong. That was the irritating part. He had a way of being not wrong that was efficient enough to be mildly infuriating because it moved too fast and left her with no obvious counterpoint to land. "Tell me something true about yourself," she said. Not professional. Something that doesn't come with a title attached. He was quiet for a moment. Not the silence of someone who didn't have an answer, but the silence of someone deciding whether the person across from them had earned one. "I haven't sat in a place like this in about 4 years," he said finally. She looked around. A coffee shop. A room where nobody knows who I am and nobody wants anything. "Cora wants your coffee order." "Cora wants my coffee order," he acknowledged. That's an acceptable kind of wanting. Evelyn drank her coffee. Outside, a cab moved through the intersection with its roof light off, carrying someone somewhere. The city did what it always did, kept going, indifferent and total. "Who are you when people do know who you are?" she asked. He thought about it. Someone they're careful around. "Are you dangerous?" The question landed flat and direct because she decided somewhere between the restaurant and this coffee shop that she was not going to perform politeness at the expense of accuracy. She had too much to lose to be careless, and carelessness always started with the questions you chose not to ask. Ronan met her eyes. "Yes," he said. She didn't flinch. She didn't lean back. She kept her hands around her coffee cup and looked at him the way she looked at exhibits in a case file, with full attention and zero performance. "To me," she said, a pause. "No," he said. "Not to you." "How would I know that?" "You wouldn't," he said. "Not from one answer. Not from one evening. That's not how knowing works." She recognized the honesty in that and sat with it for a moment. "What do you mean when you say dangerous?" she asked. "I mean that I operate in spaces where the rules that govern most people's lives are applied differently," he said. "I mean that the people around me are not always safe. I mean that my name means something in rooms you would not want to be in." "What does it mean?" "That I'm someone with the capacity to make problems disappear," he said. "And the willingness to do it when the situation requires it." She heard every layer of that sentence. She was trained to hear layers. "And what kind of situations require it?" she said. "Kind where someone has decided that the rules don't apply to them," Ronan said, "and needs to be reminded otherwise." The coffee shop hummed around them. Someone 2 tables over was laughing at their phone. Cora was refilling a mug at the counter. The night pressed against the windows, and the city did not stop. Evelyn made a decision. "I'm going to ask you one more question," she said. "And I want a straight answer. Not a careful one. Straight." "All right. Are you in organized crime?" Ronan held her gaze. "Yes," he said. The word sat between them like something dropped from a height. Not explosive. Just present. Evelyn breathed in slowly. Breathed out. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he repeated, like he was confirming that he'd heard her correctly. "I'm not going to pretend I'm not processing that," she said. "I am. But I asked because I needed to know. And you answered because." She paused. "Why did you answer?" "Because you asked directly," he said, "and because lying to you felt worse than the alternative." "You don't know me?" "No," he said, "but I've been lied to by people I've known for 20 years, and I can usually tell the difference between someone who wants a comfortable answer and someone who wants a real one." "You wanted a real one." She looked at him for a long time. "I have to study tomorrow," she said. "Evidence law. I have a practice exam." "All right." "And this," she gestured between them, meaning the evening, the kiss, the coffee. The admission that was still sitting between them, like a stone dropped in still water, doesn't have a category yet. "I don't put things in categories until I understand them." "That's fair. I'm not afraid of you," she said. "I know. That probably should worry me more than it does." He almost smiled. "Probably." She finished her coffee. He finished his. They sat for another 20 minutes, talking about nothing that mattered. She mentioned a case she was studying for her prep course. A landmark property dispute she found genuinely interesting, and he asked questions about it that were specific enough to suggest he actually followed the answer. He mentioned that he had grown up in a house where money was not the problem, and trust was, and she understood from the way he said it that he was not asking for sympathy, just offering a fact. When she left, he walked her to the corner and did not offer to share a cab, and did not ask for her number. He said, "Good luck with the evidence exam." She said, "Don't kiss strangers." He said, "I'll take that under consideration." She walked toward the subway and did not look back, which took more effort than it should have. 3 days later, the flowers arrived. She was at her desk at Merritt, Caldwell, reviewing a motion response that needed to be filed by 4 o'clock when the receptionist, whose name was actually Patricia, which made Grant's life feel fresh and ugly again, knocked on her open door, holding an arrangement of white flowers that were simple and expensive in a way that didn't call attention to itself. No card with an explanation. Just still waiting for that answer, Tesoro. Evelyn put the card face down on her desk and returned to the motion response. She didn't tell anyone about the flowers. She also didn't throw them away. That was the problem, really. That was the thing she kept coming back to in the days that followed, in the margins of evidence review and the spaces between deposition summaries. She hadn't thrown them away. She'd taken them home and put them on the kitchen counter where she could see them from the table where she studied, and she had not examined too carefully what that meant. She ran into Dana that Saturday at the farmer's market on Columbus, which was something they did occasionally when their schedules aligned, walk slow through the vegetable stalls and catch up on the week without the formality of making actual plans. Dana got to it faster than Evelyn expected. "Marcus told me," Dana said, examining a bunch of carrots with more attention than carrots generally required. "Told you what about Ronan Blackwell?" She set the carrots down. "That you two are seeing each other." Evelyn kept walking. "We had coffee. Grant told half the table that you came in with Ronan Blackwell on your arm. Grant wasn't supposed to be at that dinner. I know, and I'm sorry about that. I've told you I'm sorry." "I know you did. But Evelyn, Ronan Blackwell." Dana said his name the way people said names that came with weather attached. Marcus got very quiet when I asked him about it. Marcus doesn't get quiet about things. "What did he say?" "He said Ronan was a good man to know and a bad man to cross. And then he changed the subject to whether we should do outdoor seating at the wedding, which is code for I'm done with this conversation." Evelyn stopped at a stall selling bread and bought a sourdough she didn't need. "He's complicated," she said. "That's a sentence people use when the simpler sentence is frightening," Dana said. "I know what he is, Dana." A pause. "Do you?" Dana said. "I'm a paralegal at a litigation firm. I have spent 2.5 years reading case files that involve people who made decisions without full information. I am not making decisions without full information. You're defending him. I'm defending my own intelligence." Dana was quiet for a moment. She had known Evelyn long enough to recognize the difference between someone who had thought about something and someone who was still in the process of thinking, and she was watching Evelyn the way you watched someone standing close to a ledge, not panicked, but paying close attention. "Just be careful," Dana said finally. "I'm always careful." "You were careful with Grant too," Dana said quietly. "And that man still found ways to make you feel like you were failing at something." Evelyn didn't answer that. She brought the sourdough home and put it on the same counter as the flowers and sat at her study table and tried to read about hearsay exceptions. And what she thought about instead was the look on Ronan's face when he said, "Yes, direct," and unashamed, like a man who had long ago made peace with what he was and was not interested in softening it for anyone's comfort. She thought that was probably a quality that could be admirable or devastating, depending on the direction it was pointed. She was still thinking about it when her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She didn't answer unknown numbers. She let it go to voicemail. 20 seconds later, a text came through from the same number. "It's Ronan. I got this from Marcus. I should have asked for it myself on Thursday. I wanted to check that the flowers weren't the wrong call." She looked at the text for a long time. She typed back, "They weren't the wrong call." 3 seconds. "Good. Then how was the evidence exam?" She found herself smiling before she'd made any decision to smile, which was the kind of thing that snuck up on you and felt, in retrospect, like it had been there longer than you noticed. "Brutal," she typed. "I think I got the confrontation clause questions wrong." "What makes you think that?" "Because I second-guessed myself on 2 of them, and the second guess was probably right, which means the first instinct was right, and I overthought it into wrong." "What would you have answered?" "First instinct," she told him. He asked a follow-up that was specific enough to make her stop and reconsider the problem from a different angle. And she found herself sitting cross-legged on her study chair at 11:15 on a Saturday night talking through constitutional law with a man who ran a criminal organization. And the absolutely inconvenient thing about it was that he was good at the conversation. He asked questions that didn't pretend to be answers. He followed the logic. He didn't perform interest, he just had it. They texted until past midnight. On Sunday, she went back to her books. On Monday, Grant Holloway called her office line. Patricia transferred it without checking, because Grant had given his name as a client inquiry, which was not a small manipulation, and told Evelyn something about how he operated when he thought he wasn't being watched. "How are you getting my direct line?" she said before he could start. "I called the front desk," Grant said. "Easy enough." "What do you want, Grant?" Not a question. She'd learned that from her boss, Diane, the removal of the question mark from questions you didn't actually want answered, because it took away his ability to take his time getting to the point. "I wanted to talk about the other night," Grant said. "Feel like it got strange." "You told a room full of people I worked reception," she said. "That's what made it strange. I forgot where you worked." "I thought." "You didn't forget," she said. "You knew I would correct you, and you said it anyway, because correcting you would have made me look difficult, and staying quiet would have let the impression stand. It was a choice, Grant. You made it deliberately." Pause. "Evelyn, and now you've called me at work using a false pretense," she said, which I'm going to assume means you're curious about Ronan Blackwell. "And I'm going to tell you that my personal life is not something I discuss with people who use the word receptionist as a weapon." Silence on the line. "He's not who you think he is," Grant said. "Tell me who you think he is," she said. Another pause longer. "I've heard his name in certain contexts," Grant said carefully. Business contexts. The kind where you hear a name and you understand that it comes with weight attached. "Weight," she repeated. "The kind that can fall on people around him," Grant said. "I'm not trying to cause problems. I'm saying you're smart, Evelyn. You always were. I just don't want you to be in a situation you don't fully understand." She let the silence run for 3 full seconds. "Thank you for your concern," she said. "Don't call this number again." She hung up. Her hand was completely steady, which she took as information. She sat at her desk for a moment. Then she opened her email and found Ronan's text thread still open on her phone beside it, and she thought about what Grant had said, "Weight that can fall on people around him," and she thought about the conversation in the coffee shop, the directness of that single syllable, "yes," and she thought about Dana's face at the farmer's market. She was a woman who had spent 3 years rebuilding a sense of herself that one relationship had quietly dismantled. She had done it through work and study and the slow, deliberate reconstruction of certainty about her own judgment. She had not done it by being reckless. She picked up her phone. She texted Ronan, "Can we meet this week? I have questions." His reply came in 40 seconds, Wednesday evening. Same place. She put the phone face down on her desk and returned to the motion response. She told herself she was gathering information. She told herself she was due diligence, the same exercise of careful attention she brought to every matter that came across her desk. She told herself a lot of things. Wednesday came. She arrived at Marin's first, which she'd intended, and took the back corner booth, which was hers anyway. She ordered coffee before he arrived, and had her hands wrapped around it, and her expression arranged into something she hoped read as composed, because composed was what she needed to be for the question she was about to ask. Ronan came through the door at 7 exactly, scanned the room the way he always did. She'd noticed it was always the same sequence. Left to right, exits first, then interior, and came directly to her booth without any of the hesitation that most people carried into uncertain social situations. He sat. "You have questions," he said. "Grant called me at work on Monday," she said. Something changed in his face. Not dramatically, it wasn't a flinch, wasn't alarm, but the quality of his attention shifted. Heightened. "He called your office line," Ronan said, using a false name to get past the front desk. A pause. "What did he say?" "He said your name comes with weight. That things can fall on people around you." She looked at him evenly. He was trying to warn me off. But the way he said it, it wasn't just a concerned ex-boyfriend. He knew something specific. He'd heard something specific. Ronan was quiet. He knows something about you, Evelyn said. And I need to know if that's a problem. Not for his sake. For mine. What kind of problem are you imagining? Kind where a man who already doesn't like you decides that I'm a convenient pressure point, she said. The kind where my connection to you, even a new and undefined connection, puts me in a position I didn't choose and don't fully understand. I have a career I've spent years building. I have an exam I'm going to pass. I have a life that I have constructed very carefully from the ground up, and I am not going to let it become collateral in something I don't understand. The words landed harder than she'd planned. But they were accurate, and accuracy mattered more than softness right now. Ronan looked at his coffee cup. Then, back at her, Grant Holloway has done business in spaces that intersect with mine, he said. Indirectly. Through intermediaries. The kind of business that people do when they want the benefit of certain arrangements without the paperwork that would attach their name to them. She went completely still. He's not a player in my world, Ronan continued. He's not significant enough for that. But he's dipped into the edges of it, and that means he knows enough to understand what my name means. And it means he also knows that if he's heard my name in connection with you, he can't simply bully you the same way he did 3 years ago. You know about 3 years ago, she said. I know what you told me Thursday night, he said. That's all. She believed him. She shouldn't have. Necessarily, belief was not something you extended this quickly to someone who had just admitted to being dangerous, but she did, and she filed the believing away as data about herself. Is he going to be a problem? She asked. Not if he's smart, Ronan said. He's not smart. He's strategic. Those are different things. Yes, Ronan said, and something in the way he said it told her. He had met a great many strategic men who had mistaken themselves for smart ones. She breathed in. I need you to tell me something honestly. All right, if I keep seeing you talking to you, whatever this is, am I in danger? He didn't answer immediately. She gave him that. She had asked for honesty, which meant she had to give him time to find it, rather than just give her the comfortable version. I can't promise you that you are completely outside the edges of my world, he said finally. Anyone who knows me is connected to me in ways I can't fully control. What I can tell you is that I take the protection of people I care about seriously. More seriously than most things. We've had coffee twice, she said. I know. You can't care about someone you've met twice. I know that too, he said. I'm telling you what the trajectory looks like, not what the current position is. She sat with that for a moment. The trajectory. She turned her coffee cup slowly in her hands. I'm not walking away, she said. She hadn't planned to say it. She had planned to take more time. She had planned to treat this like evidence review. Gather, assess, decide. Present conclusion, only when you were sure of it. But she was looking at him across a coffee shop table, in a mismatched chair, in a place that had been on the same corner for 30 years. And she had spent 3 years in the aftermath of a relationship that has made her smaller. And she was tired deeply, specifically tired of making decisions based primarily on what was safest. I need you to understand what you're saying, Ronan said. I understand it, she said. I'm a paralegal at a litigation firm. I have spent years understanding what things mean before I say them. I'm saying it. He looked at her the way he had looked at her in the restaurant, with that specific attention that made her feel located rather than observed. Then I need to tell you something, he said. She waited. Grant Holloway didn't just call your office to warn you, Ronan said. I know this because I have people who monitor certain communication channels as a matter of standard practice. He made 2 other calls after yours. One to a man named Victor Crane, who works in private security and occasionally does work that falls outside the legal definition of that term. The second to someone I haven't identified yet. The air in the coffee shop felt different now. He's not trying to warn you away from me, Ronan said quietly. He's trying to find a way to apply pressure. On you or on me through you? I don't know which yet. Evelyn's hands tightened around her cup. Why? She said. Because I walked into a room and removed his ability to make you feel worthless, Ronan said. And men like Grant Holloway cannot tolerate that. Their entire sense of self depends on the hierarchy, holding exactly where they put it. I disrupted his hierarchy, and now he is going to try to restore it. She looked at him steadily. Tell me what you need from me, she said. Nothing yet, he said. I need you to go home, lock your door, and behave exactly as normal. Don't let him know you're aware of the calls. Don't give him any signal that anything has changed. And you? I'm going to find out who the second call went to, he said. And I'm going to make sure that whatever Grant Holloway is planning runs into something significantly more solid than he's prepared for. His voice had not raised. His face had not changed dramatically. But the man sitting across from her now was not the same proportion as the man who had asked if she wanted coffee after a dinner party. He was larger somehow, denser, like a shape that had been partially visible, suddenly coming fully into the light. Evelyn looked at him. She had walked into this evening, planning to gather information and make a careful decision. She had gathered the information. The decision, it turned out, had already been made not in this booth, not even in the restaurant 3 days ago, but somewhere in the 2 years of evidence review and deposition prep and 4-hour sleep cycles and the slow construction of a person who trusted her own judgment enough to act on it. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. He went still. Wednesday evening, she said. Same place. Until further notice. He looked at her hand on his. Then he looked at her face. And for the first time since she'd met Ronan Blackwell, she watched something cross his expression that less like control and more like the absence of it, brief, unguarded, and gone before she could fully name it, but real. Wednesday evenings, he said. Outside, the city kept moving. Somewhere in it, a man named Grant Holloway was making calls he believed were quiet and careful and undetected to people who operated in shadows he thought he understood. And he was building something that he believed would restore the order of things to the position he preferred. He did not yet know that the woman he'd spent years reducing to a punchline had just put her hand on the table of the most dangerous man in New York and told him she wasn't leaving. That miscalculation was going to cost him everything. The first week after Wednesday felt like weather changing. Not dramatic, not lightning, and sudden cold, but the slow, pressurized shift that happened when a front moved in from somewhere distant and the air started carrying a different quality. Evelyn felt it in small things. The way she slept differently, heavier, like her body had finally decided that some internal argument was settled. The way she sat at her study table and got through 3 chapters of evidence review without losing the thread. The way she stopped, midway through a practice exam on Friday morning, and realized she hadn't thought about Grant Holloway in 4 days. That last one surprised her. She had spent a considerable portion of the last 3 years thinking about Grant Holloway in the involuntary way you thought about things that had hurt you, not because you wanted to, but because the mind kept returning to unresolved wounds, the way a tongue kept finding a sore tooth. Now he was simply a fact in her peripheral vision. Present but not central, not worth the architecture. Ronan texted on Thursday morning. Nothing significant. Did you find out about the confrontation clause questions? She had. She'd gotten both of them right. First instinct, which she'd then second-guessed into wrong, before guessing back to right on the actual exam. First instinct was correct, she texted back, which I knew before I knew it, if that makes sense. It makes sense, he replied. That's most of what decision-making actually is. She thought about that longer than was strictly necessary. She didn't hear from him again until Sunday evening, when a text came through at 9:40. I found the second number. She was in bed with her evidence textbook open on her chest, and she sat up. His reply took 4 minutes. Not a conversation for text. Wednesday. She put the phone down. She did not sleep particularly well after that. The week moved the way weeks moved when you were waiting for something with an almost insulting normalcy. Depositions got prepped. A motion got filed. Diane stopped by her desk on Tuesday to say that Evelyn's research memo on the Feldman case had been exactly what she needed, which was Diane's version of a standing ovation. Patricia from the front desk brought in birthday cake for someone in accounts. Evelyn ate a piece and talked about nothing for 12 minutes in the break room and felt the surreal quality of ordinary life continuing to be ordinary while something else was building somewhere out of sight. Wednesday came. She arrived at Marin's at 6:50. Cora had her coffee ready at the counter before she reached her booth, which meant Cora had been watching for her, which meant Cora had also been watching for Ronan the previous Wednesday, which meant that Evelyn's interior life was apparently more legible than she preferred. Ronan arrived at 7 exactly. Same sequence, left to right exits, interior, and came to the booth with something different in his posture. Not visibly tense. He didn't carry tension the way most people did, in their shoulders or their jaw. He carried it the way a structure carried load, internally, distributed, nowhere you could point to directly but present in the overall density of him. He sat down. He did not pick up the menu. "The second number," Evelyn said. "The second number belongs to a man named Daniel Foss," Ronan said. "He works for a private intelligence firm out of New Jersey. Background checks, asset tracing, that category. He also does work for a law firm." She waited. "Harwick and Streel," he said, "civil litigation. They specialize in professional misconduct and disciplinary proceedings." Coffee shop noise went somewhere far away. "Grant is trying to file a professional complaint against me," she said. "He's gathering material for one," Ronan said. "Foss was hired to pull your employment history, your financials, and any documented associations. The theory, as best I can reconstruct it, is that if he can establish a documented relationship between you and me, he can make a credible argument that you've been using your position at the firm to access information on his behalf." Evelyn's hands were flat on the table. "I have never done that," she said. "I know, I have never accessed a single client file, a single opposing party record, or a single piece of privileged information for any reason other than the case it was filed under." "I know," he said again. "He can't prove something that didn't happen." "No," Ronan said. "But a formal disciplinary inquiry doesn't require proof. It requires a credible allegation and a pattern of association that looks bad enough to demand investigation. If he files with the state bar and your firm finds out there's an active inquiry before you've passed your exam, they remove you from client-facing work pending resolution. Diane Caldwell is a careful woman. She can't afford the optics of a future attorney under bar investigation working active litigation files." Evelyn sat with this. She was very good in general at sitting with bad information without letting it break her posture. She had learned this in deposition prep, where Diane had told her once that the most valuable thing a litigator could do was receive terrible information without physically telegraphing that it was terrible. Because the moment you showed the other side you were rattled, you'd handed them something you could not get back. She was using that now. "How long does he have before he files?" she asked. "Foss's contract with Harwick and Streel runs 30 days from last Thursday," Ronan said. "So 3 weeks, roughly. He needs enough documentation to make the complaint non-frivolous. A frivolous complaint gets dismissed and reflects on the person who filed it. He needs something real. He doesn't have anything real," she said. "Because there's nothing real to have. He has photographs," Ronan said. "A beat of us at Marin's," he continued, "both weeks. And of the dinner. And of you walking away from the dinner with me. In the wrong hands, with the wrong framing, those photographs tell a specific story." She looked at him. "You knew someone was watching," she said. "I suspected it starting last Wednesday," he said. "I didn't say anything because I wasn't certain, and I didn't want to alter your behavior in ways that would make the surveillance more complicated to manage. You made a decision about my information again," she said. Her voice was level. "Without telling me." He held her gaze. "That's not acceptable." "No," he said, "it isn't. I'm telling you now because I've decided that your ability to make fully informed choices matters more than my instinct to manage information until I'm certain of it. That's a habit I'm working against." She absorbed that. It was an honest thing to say. It was also a complicated thing to say, because it acknowledged a real pattern in him, the information management, the instinct to control what people knew, and when they knew it, and she was not going to pretend it wasn't there just because he'd named it himself. "Going forward," she said, "I get everything when you get it." Not when you've decided it's the right time. When you get it. Agreed, he said. I mean that literally, Ronan. I know you do, he said, agreed. She took a slow breath. So what do we do about the photographs? Foss is a private intelligence contractor, Ronan said. He works for money. The easiest solution is to make his current contract financially unattractive. You're going to pay him to drop it. I'm going to make him understand that the downside risk continuing his current engagement significantly outweighs the fee, he said. That's a different thing. She thought about the distinction for a moment. She wasn't certain it was actually different. She also wasn't certain it was wrong. And Grant, she said. Grant is the underlying problem, Ronan said. Foss is a symptom. If we address Foss without addressing Grant, he finds another contractor and the timeline resets. So what happens to Grant? Ronan was quiet for a moment. That depends on how permanent a solution you want, he said carefully. She looked at him directly. I'm going to need you to be specific about what you mean by permanent. I mean whether you want him simply stopped, Ronan said, or whether you want him gone from your life in a way that doesn't leave room for a third attempt. I'm not asking you to hurt him, she said. I know. I mean that seriously. Whatever you do, it cannot involve physical harm to Grant Holloway. Not because I have any remaining attachment to him. Because I am going to be a lawyer, and I cannot have that on my conscience or in my background, and because it is wrong. There are other ways to make someone permanently uninterested in a fight, Ronan said. She waited. He has his own exposure, Ronan said. The business he's done through intermediaries, the edges of my world he's dipped into, as I told you Wednesday before last. There's a paper trail. Not clean, not direct, but traceable by someone who knows what they're looking for. If that trail were brought to the attention of certain people, Grant Holloway would be significantly occupied with his own problems for the foreseeable future. Evelyn sat with this. She was a paralegal studying to be a lawyer. She had spent 2.5 years in a system that was built on the principle that outcomes should follow from process, not from who had the most power to impose them. She believed in that principle. She'd committed her professional life to it. She also understood that the principle was not uniformly applied, that the system she believed in was navigated very differently depending on what resources you had, and that Grant Holloway had already demonstrated that he was willing to use the architecture of that system as a weapon against her. She looked at Ronan. Don't do anything that puts you in legal jeopardy, she said. That's my only condition. Whatever you do, it can't come back on you in a way that she stopped. In a way that what? He said. She realized what she'd been about to say. In a way that takes you away from me. She hadn't planned to say it. She rerouted. In a way that creates a bigger problem than the one we're solving, she said. He looked at her the way he sometimes looked at her, like he'd heard the sentence she'd replaced, as clearly as the one she'd given him. He said nothing about it. I'll handle it, he said. She nodded. They stayed another 40 minutes. The conversation moved, as it always did. From the immediate to the lateral, she told him about the Feldman case, without specifics, about the structural argument she found interesting. And he listened the same way he always listened, with the whole of his attention. He told her something about a Port Authority negotiation in New Jersey that had gone sideways in a way that was, as in the abstract, genuinely interesting as a problem. They did not perform comfort with each other. They simply were comfortable, in the particular slightly uneven way of two people who had found a frequency they could both operate on. When she left, he walked her to the corner again. The city was cold, the first real cold of the season, and she had her coat buttoned to the collar and her hands in her pockets. He said, I'll take care of it by the end of the week. She said, tell me when it's done. I will. She turned to go. He said her name, just her name, nothing attached to it, and she turned back, and he looked at her for a moment with something in his face that was not managed, that had not been passed through any filter before it reached his expression. Thank you, he said, for not leaving. She thought about that for exactly the length of a breath. Wednesday, she said, and walked. She was halfway down the block when she heard very faintly behind her the exhale of a man who had been holding something for longer than was comfortable. She kept walking. She did not know, at that moment, that the thing Grant had set in motion was significantly more complicated than either of them understood. She did not know that Daniel Foss, the intelligence contractor, had already filed a preliminary report. She did not know that the report had gone not only to Harwick and Streel, but to a second recipient, one that neither she nor Ronan had identified. She did not know that inside Ronan's organization, a man who had been with him for 9 years, was reading that same preliminary report in an office 3 miles from where she was walking. His name was Marcus Webb, and he was Ronan's head of internal operations. He had been with Blackwell Group since before it had that name, since the time when it was still a collection of debts and territories, and the word of a young man who'd inherited a burning building and had 2 years to decide whether to let it burn or rebuild it into something that could stand. Marcus Webb had been the one who stayed, who helped rebuild, who turned a collection of dangerous, fractious men into something that operated with enough internal discipline to be called an organization. He was also the one who, 18 months ago, had begun having quiet conversations with a federal task force investigator named Sonia Vance, in exchange for an arrangement that would give him complete immunity from any past criminal exposure if he delivered one thing: Ronan Blackwell. He had spent 18 months trying to build that case, looking for a weakness in Ronan's personal life, because Ronan's professional operations were clean enough, layered enough. That direct approach was nearly impossible. Then Evelyn Hartwell appeared in a restaurant in a green dress, and a man named Grant Holloway got humiliated, and a private intelligence report landed in Marcus Webb's email alongside an invoice from Harwick and Streel because Grant, desperate and not as strategic as he thought, had decided the best way to apply pressure to Ronan was to find someone in Ronan's circle who might be willing to use the information. He'd found exactly the wrong person, or, depending on where you stood, exactly the right one. Evelyn didn't know any of this on Wednesday night as she walked to the subway. She didn't know it on Thursday when she went to work and proofed a response brief and ate lunch at her desk. She didn't know it on Friday when she got a text from Ronan that said simply, "Foss has been handled. The contract is dissolved." She texted back, "And Grant?" A longer pause this time, in progress. "Give me the weekend." She gave him the weekend. Saturday passed. Sunday morning, she ran 4 miles in the park, the way she did every Sunday, not because she loved it, but because it was the 1 hour of the week where her brain was moving too fast for anxiety to keep up, and came home, and showered, and was sitting, with her second coffee and her laptop open to a practice exam when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. She answered. Miss Hartwell, a woman's voice. Controlled, professional, carrying the specific register of institutional authority, not legal, not corporate, something else. "My name is Sonia Vance. I'm a federal investigator with the Department of Justice. I'd like to speak with you about Ronan Blackwell." Evelyn put her coffee down very carefully. "I'm going to need to confirm your identity before I speak to anyone about anything," she said. "Of course," Vance said. "You can call the DOJ main switchboard and ask to be connected to the Organized Crime Division. Ask for Case Liaison Extension 447. I'll hold." Evelyn did exactly that. It took 8 minutes. The extension connected to Sonia Vance's voicemail, which had her name and her title, and a case number that matched the division. She called the unknown number back. "Confirmed," Evelyn said. "What do you want?" "I want to talk to you about your relationship with Ronan Blackwell," Vance said. "In person. Today, if you're available." "I'm not available today," Evelyn said. "And I'm going to need to know the legal basis for this conversation before I agree to have it at all." "You're not under subpoena," Vance said. "This is a voluntary interview request. You're free to decline, and you're free to bring an attorney." "I don't have an attorney. I'm studying for the bar." "Then you're nearly qualified to advise yourself," Vance said, and there was something in it that wasn't quite humor but occupied the same space. "Miss Hartwell, I want to be direct with you. You are not a target of this investigation. You may, however, be in possession of information that is relevant to it. And you may separately be in a position that is more dangerous than you currently understand." Evelyn was quiet. "How long have you been investigating Ronan Blackwell?" she said. "I can't discuss the scope of the investigation in a preliminary contact." Then I can't agree to meet without knowing what I'm agreeing to, Evelyn said. Monday morning. Let me know the time and location. I'll consider it over the weekend and confirm or decline Sunday night. Pause. All right. And I want it in writing. An email to my personal address, not my work address, outlining the voluntary nature of the interview and my right to terminate it at any time. I'll send it this afternoon, Vance said. She hung up. She sat in her apartment for a long time after that. The coffee went cold. The practice exam sat open on her laptop, and she did not look at it. She picked up her phone and called Ronan. He answered on the second ring, which was the first time she'd called instead of texted, and she heard in the single syllable of his yes that he registered the difference. A federal investigator from the DOJ Organized Crime Division called me this morning, she said. Her name is Sonia Vance. She wants a voluntary interview about you. She says I'm not a target. 3 seconds of silence. Where are you? He said. My apartment. Stay there, he said. I'm coming. Ronan, 30 minutes, he said. Don't talk to anyone. Don't text anyone. Don't answer any calls you don't recognize. 30 minutes. He hung up. She sat with the dead phone in her hand and thought about the emails sitting in her inbox from Daniel Foss's dissolved contract and the photographs of 2 people meeting in a coffee shop for innocent reasons that looked assembled in the right sequence, like exactly the kind of thing a federal investigator would call about. She thought about Ronan saying, I can't promise you that you are completely outside the edges of my world. She thought about herself saying, I'm not walking away. She had meant it when she said it, was still not walking away. But the ground under that decision had just shifted significantly. He arrived in 28 minutes. She heard the knock and opened the door, and he came in the way he entered, all spaces scanning, settling, splitting, moving direct to the thing that needed addressing, except that this time there was something different underneath it. Compression in him. Something running at higher pressure than usual. She told him everything, every word, in order. He listened without interrupting, which was one of the things she had already learned about him, that he didn't perform listening. He actually did it. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Sonia Vance, he said. You know her? I know of her, he said. She's been running a case in the Organized Crime Division for approximately 2 years. She's good, patient. She doesn't move until she thinks she has something solid. Does she have something solid? She hasn't had anything solid, he said. My operations are structured so that the legal exposure is distributed in a way that makes direct attribution extremely difficult. That's not arrogance, it's the result of very careful work over a long period of time. Then why is she calling me? He looked at her, and she saw it in his face, not the answer, but the presence of the answer, the moment before something was said that could not be unsaid. Who else did Grant Holloway call? She said. You said 2 calls. Foss was one. You told me the second was someone you hadn't identified yet. I identified them, he said, on Thursday. Her chest went tight. And you were going to tell me Wednesday. Yes. Tell me now. He sat down. Not on the couch, on the chair across from it, which she registered as a choice, as though he wanted the table of clear space between them. The second call Grant made was to Marcus Webb, Ronan said. She didn't know the name. She waited. Marcus is my head of internal operations, he said. He has been with me for 9 years. He knows more about the architecture of my organization than anyone alive. Past tense hadn't arrived yet, but she felt it coming. He has also, for the last 18 months, been cooperating with a federal investigation, Ronan said. In exchange for personal immunity, the room was very quiet. He's been feeding information to Sonia Vance, Ronan said. Building a case from the inside. The reason she hasn't moved yet is because she needed something that could establish personal culpability at my level. Something that couldn't be attributed to the organization abstractly, but had to come back to me specifically. And Grant gave her that, Evelyn said. Grant gave Marcus the photographs and the Foss report, Ronan said. Marcus gave those to Vance. And what Vance now has is documented evidence that I have a personal relationship with a woman who works at a litigation firm, which, combined with whatever Marcus has fed her over 18 months, can be framed as suggesting that I've been using your firm's client database for intelligence gathering. That is not what happened. I know. I have never... I know, he said, Evelyn. I know. But the framing is what creates the investigation, not the truth. And an investigation that puts your name and my name in the same federal case file has consequences for you that are completely independent of what actually happened. She stood up. She crossed to the window and stood looking at the street below the ordinary traffic. The ordinary Sunday afternoon, a woman walking a dog, 2 kids on the steps of the building across the way, and she thought about Diane Caldwell, who had told her 6 months ago there was a conversation to be had when she passed the exam. She thought about the bar application she had partially filled out. Character and fitness section, where you disclosed any pending investigations. She thought about the fact that she had done absolutely nothing wrong. She thought about the fact that doing nothing wrong had never been sufficient protection against the wrong story being told about you. She turned around. Marcus Webb has been in your organization for 9 years, she said. Yes. And he has been cooperating with federal investigators for 18 months. Yes. Does he know that you know? Ronan looked at her. As of Thursday night, no, he said. He thinks his cooperation has been undetected. Then we have a window, she said. He went still. She crossed back to the center of the room and stood there with her hands at her sides and her voice completely level, the same level she used in the office when she was delivering information that had to be heard clearly the first time. If Marcus doesn't know you've identified him, then he doesn't know the timeline has changed, she said. Which means Vance doesn't know the timeline has changed. Which means there is a gap between what they think they have and what they can actually use, and that gap is where we move. Ronan was looking at her with an expression she had not seen on him before, not the managed attention, not the calculated calm. Something rawer, something that looked like a man who had been carrying a weight alone for a very long time and had just felt someone's hand on the other end of it. You said we, he said. I said we, she said. This isn't your fight, Evelyn. They called me, she said. They put my name in a federal file. They used my career as a lever. That made it my fight whether I chose it or not. The only question is whether I fight it standing beside you or standing somewhere else. He breathed in slowly. What are you thinking? He said. I'm thinking, she said, that you need to tell me everything. Not the managed version. Not the information you've decided I'm ready for. Everything. Because if I'm walking into an interview with a federal investigator on Monday morning and I want to come out of it with my career and my bar application intact, I need to know exactly what the landscape looks like. If I tell you everything, I know what that means, she said. I've thought about it. Tell me anyway. He looked at her for a long moment. Outside, the city continued its Sunday afternoon indifferent, constant, entirely unconcerned with the conversation happening 3 floors above the street. Cab moved through the intersection. Someone's music drifted up from below, too faint to identify. Ronan Blackwell, who had spent his entire adult life controlling what people knew about him, who had built an organization on the principle that information was the most dangerous currency there was, who had looked at Evelyn Hartwell across a coffee shop table and told himself he was simply managing a situation, leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and began to tell her the truth. All of it. And Evelyn Hartwell, who had spent 3 years rebuilding herself from the inside out, who had carried evidence textbooks to bed and proofread briefs on 4 hours of sleep and promised herself she would never again let someone else's assessment of her define the room she stood in. Listen to every word. She did not flinch. She did not reach for comfort. She pulled out a notepad from the drawer beside the couch, the one she used for bar prep notes, and she began to write down what mattered. Because if Monday morning was coming, she was going to be ready for it. And because the woman who had walked into a dinner party 3 weeks ago, trying to survive one uncomfortable evening, had already become someone entirely different, someone who did not wait for the situation to become manageable before she stepped into it, but who stepped in first and made it manageable herself. Sunday night, Evelyn did not sleep. She sat at her study table until 2 in the morning with the notepad open and Ronan's words arranged in front of her in her own handwriting, her small, compressed script. The sound like green the kind that fit more on a page than it looked like it should, and she read through what she'd written 3 times until it stopped feeling like someone else's life and started feeling like a problem she could actually work. Because that was what it was. That was how she had to hold it. Not a catastrophe. Problems had edges. Problems had variables. Problems could be entered from different angles until you found the one that gave you traction. Ronan had left at midnight over her objection that he should stay and keep working through it, and he had said very quietly that she needed 4 hours of sleep before Monday and that she would think more clearly for it, which was accurate and also infuriating in the particular way that accurate things were infuriating when you didn't want to stop. He had stood at her door for a moment before he left. "You don't have to go into that interview," he said. "Yes, I do," she said. "Evelyn, if I decline a voluntary interview with a federal investigator after being contacted directly, that decision gets noted," she said. "And if Marcus is feeding Vance information, and Vance is already building a picture of me as someone adjacent to your operations, then declining to cooperate becomes evidence of consciousness of guilt. I'm a paralegal. I know how that reads." He had looked at her for a moment with that expression she was starting to recognize as the one where the control was present, but something underneath it was pressing against the surface. "Tell her the truth," he said. "Exactly what happened. Don't embellish, don't minimize. The truth is clean." "I know how to give a statement," she said. "I know you do." "Then trust me to do it another moment." "I trust you," he said. It didn't sound like a concession. It sounded like a fact he had already arrived at and was reporting. Closed the door and went back to her notepad. She slept from 2 to 6. She woke with a particular clarity of insufficient sleep that has been exactly sufficient, the kind where your body made a deal with you and delivered on its end of it. She showered, dressed in the most conservative thing she owned, which was a charcoal blazer and dark trousers that she wore for court filings. And she ate half a piece of toast and drank coffee standing at her kitchen counter and looked at the white flowers on the windowsill, which had not yet died. She took the subway downtown. The DOJ Field's office was in a building that looked exactly like what it was, federal, institutional, the architecture of authority, without any attempt to make that authority comfortable. She gave her name at the desk, waited 7 minutes in a chair that was designed to be sat in and not to be sat in comfortably, and was brought by a silent escort to a conference room on the 4th floor. Sonia Vance was already there. She was younger than Evelyn had expected, mid-40s, maybe, with dark hair pulled back and the kind of face that had been trained out of expressiveness. Not cold, exactly. Careful. The face of someone who had learned that what they showed in a room mattered as much as what they said. There was a second person in the room, a man, 50s, sitting to Vance's left with a legal pad and a pen and the air of someone who was there to record and not to lead. "Miss Hartwell," Vance said, "thank you for coming in. I want to state for the record that this is a voluntary interview," Evelyn said, sitting down, "that I am not under subpoena, that I have not been read any rights, and that I retain the right to terminate this conversation at any point." "All of that is accurate," Vance said. "Do you want it recorded?" "Please." Vance nodded to the man with the legal pad, who wrote something at the top of the page. "How long have you known Ronan Blackwell?" Vance said. 3 weeks, Evelyn said. "How did you meet?" She told it straight. "The dinner, the intervention, the coffee shop, the Wednesday evenings." She left out nothing that was factual, and she added nothing that was interpretive, because interpretation was where they could find the gaps and widen them. Vance, with the quality of someone who had heard a great many versions of a great many stories and was running this one against a template she carried internally. "Has Ronan Blackwell ever asked you to access client files at Merritt, Caldwell and Associates on his behalf?" Vance said. "No," Evelyn said. "Has he ever asked you about cases your firm handles?" "No." "Have you ever provided him with information about clients, opposing parties, or case strategies from your employer?" "No." "You're certain?" "I am completely certain," Evelyn said. "In 2.5 years at that firm, I have never accessed a single file for any reason other than legitimate casework. That is verifiable through the firm's document management system, which logs every access by user and timestamp." "We're aware of that system," Vance said. "Good," Evelyn thought. Then you already know. Is it your understanding that Ronan Blackwell has criminal organizational ties? Vance said. Pause. I am aware that he operates in spaces that involve criminal exposure, Evelyn said carefully. I became aware of that in the course of our acquaintance. And you continued to see him after becoming aware of that. I did. Why? She met Vance's eyes directly, because awareness of something is not the same as culpability for it. And because my personal associations are my own business, provided they don't involve criminal conduct on my part, which they don't. Something moved at the edge of Vance's expression. Not quite approval, something adjacent to it, Miss Hartwell, Vance said, and now her voice shifted not softer, but more direct, like a gear change that dropped speed to gain precision. I want to tell you something that is not standard procedure for this kind of interview. I'm telling you because I think you are an intelligent woman who has found herself in a complicated position through no particular fault of her own, and I believe you deserve accurate information. Evelyn waited. We have an active cooperating witness inside Ronan Blackwell's organization, Vance said. That witness has been building a case file for 8 instances. Last week, that witness provided us with a preliminary report and photographs documenting your relationship with Mr. Blackwell, along with a theory of potential criminal conspiracy. Based on fabricated conduct, Evelyn said. Based on documented association and a theory, Vance said. Which, as you clearly understand, is different from proof. We are not at this moment in possession of evidence of criminal conduct on your part. Then why am I here? Because in approximately 72 hours, our cooperating witness is scheduled to provide what he claims is a final evidentiary package that will allow us to move on Ronan Blackwell, Vance said. And if that package includes material that implicates you even tangentially, your name goes into an active federal case file in a way that has professional consequences independent of any criminal finding. Evelyn's hands were flat on the table. You're warning me, she said. I'm informing you, Vance said. What you do with the information is your decision. You want me to cooperate, Evelyn said. That's what this is. Vance said nothing. You want me to provide something that supplements your cooperating witness's testimony, Evelyn said. Something that comes from inside Ronan's personal life rather than his organizational structure. Because personal-level evidence is harder to dismiss as organizational policy and easier to attribute directly to him. Vance's expression did not change. I'm not going to do that, Evelyn said. Miss Hartwell, I have told you every truthful thing I know, Evelyn said. I've told you we met, how and when. I've told you that he has never used my professional position in any capacity. I've told you I continued to see him after learning what he was. All of that is true, and all of it is the sum total of what I can honestly offer you. There may be things you've observed, Vance said. Conversations, people you've seen him speak to, anything about the way he operates that. I have had coffee with him 3 times and dinner at a restaurant once, Evelyn said. In those settings, I have observed a person having conversations about shipping logistics, evidence law, and property disputes. If that is useful to you, you may have it. A silence. Vance leaned back slightly. Your cooperating witness, she said. If his package is filed on Thursday, I understand the consequence, Evelyn said. I understood it before I walked in here, and you're still declining to cooperate further. I'm declining to speculate, invent, or provide interpretation beyond the facts I've given you, Evelyn said. Yes, Vance looked at her for a long moment. You can go, she said. Evelyn stood. She gathered nothing, because she had brought nothing except her Metro card and her keys. She buttoned her blazer. Miss Hartwell, Vance said. She stopped. The cooperating witness, Vance said. If his final package contains fabricated evidence, if someone were to bring that to our attention before Thursday, with documentation that changes the shape of this investigation considerably, it would also serve as a significant good faith gesture from anyone tangentially associated with this case. Evelyn looked at her. I don't know what that would look like, Evelyn said. I imagine you'd figure it out, Vance said. She left. She walked 4 blocks before she pulled out her phone, because 4 blocks was far enough from the federal building that no one was watching the entrance, and she could stop walking and breathe for a moment against the side of a pharmacy. She called Ronan. How did it go? He said. They're cooperating witness files, his final package on Thursday, she said. 72 hours. If that package implicates me even tangentially, my name goes into an active federal file and my bar application is finished. 3 seconds of silence. Where are you? He said. 4 blocks from the federal building. I'll have a car there in 5 minutes, he said. I don't need 5 minutes, he said. Please. She stayed against the pharmacy wall and watched the ordinary Monday morning traffic of downtown Manhattan and thought about 72 hours and a man named Marcus Webb who had spent 9 years building trust and 18 months dismantling it. The car came in 4 minutes. She got in. Ronan was already inside, which meant he hadn't been far. He looked at her face when she got in and she watched him read it, the way he read everything completely and fast. Tell me, he said. She told him everything. He listened without moving. When she got to the part about Vance's closing offer, the implicit suggestion that fabricated evidence brought forward would reshape the investigation, something changed in his expression. Not surprise. Something more complicated. She told you about Marcus, he said. She told me she had a cooperating witness, Evelyn said. She didn't use his name. But if you know it's Marcus, and they're filing Thursday, you have 72 hours. I've had 48 hours since Thursday, he said. I've been building something. What? He looked at her. I need you to understand that what I'm about to do carries risk, he said. Not physical risk, legal risk. If it goes wrong, it doesn't help your situation, and it may complicate mine. Tell me what you're doing, she said. Marcus has been feeding Vance documentation for 18 months, Ronan said. Some of that documentation is real. Some of it he has manufactured. The manufactured portions, I have the originals. I've had access to his file management system since Thursday, and I have pulled copies of everything he's sent to the DOJ alongside the originals in our system. The discrepancies are significant. She went very still. He fabricated evidence to close the gap, Ronan said. What he had was real, but not sufficient. So he supplemented it. And you have proof of the supplementation. I have documentation that proves the discrepancies exist between what he sent them and what actually happened, Ronan said. If that documentation reaches Vance before Thursday, her cooperating witness becomes a liability instead of an asset. It raises questions about every piece of evidence he's provided over 18 months. Potentially blows the entire case and exposes Marcus to criminal liability for evidence fabrication, Evelyn said. Yes. How does that documentation reach Vance? He was quiet. Ronan. Through an attorney, he said. An attorney who is not connected to my organization and who can present it as material discovered through legitimate means, under attorney-client privilege, as part of representing a client who became aware of potential misconduct within a federal investigation. She looked at him. I'm not an attorney, she said. Not yet, he said. But you know attorneys. She thought about Diane Caldwell. She thought about what she was about to ask her boss to do. This puts Diane in the middle of something she doesn't know the edges of, she said. It puts Diane in possession of a legitimate evidentiary package demonstrating that a federal cooperating witness has fabricated documentation, he said. What she does with it is her decision based on her professional judgment. She's a litigator. This is what litigators do. You're asking me to use my professional relationship to advance your interests, she said. I'm asking you to use your professional relationship to prevent your name from being entered into a federal case file on the basis of fabricated evidence, he said. The overlap with my interests is real. I won't pretend it isn't. She looked out the car window at the city moving past. She thought about Diane Caldwell telling her 6 months ago that there was a conversation to be had when she passed the exam. She thought about the bar application. She thought, about 3 years of rebuilding and 2 years of studying on 4 hours of sleep, and the fact that she had done nothing wrong, and the fact that doing nothing wrong had never, in the history of the world, been sufficient protection against a well-constructed lie. I need to see the documentation before I take it anywhere, she said. Of course, I need to verify it myself, not your word that it shows what you say it shows. My eyes on the original files and the copies, and my own assessment of the discrepancy. I'll have everything ready within the hour, he said. And if I look at it and I decide it's not what you say it is, then you walk away from it and we find another approach, he said. I'm not asking you to carry something you haven't verified. She nodded. The car moved through Midtown. Outside the city was doing what it did massive. Indifferent. Continuing. After this is over, she said. Yes, we talk about what this is, she said. Not Wednesday evenings and coffee and managed information and careful answers. What this actually is. What you are, what I am, and what we're doing. Yes, he said. Promise me. He looked at her directly. I promise you, he said. She believed him. That was still the thing that surprised her most. The documentation was everything he'd said it was. She spent 2 hours in a room at one of Ronan's legitimate business offices, a real office, with a real address and a real staff. The shipping logistics company, that was exactly what it said. It was going through the files with the attention she brought to case preparation. Side by side, the originals in Blackwell Group's system, time-stamped, unaltered, showing the legitimate movement of money and personnel through the organization's legal operations. And the copies Marcus Webb had sent to the DOJ the same files, with subtle but documentable alterations. Dates shifted, transaction descriptions changed, a meeting log that showed Ronan present at a discussion he had not attended. The discrepancies were not enormous. They were the discrepancies of a careful man, supplementing real evidence with manufactured connections, the kind of work that passed scrutiny if you only had one version and didn't survive it if you had both. She marked 12 specific discrepancies. She photographed every page with her phone. She called Diane Caldwell at 2 in the afternoon. I need to speak with you, she said, not as a paralegal. As someone who may need to engage the firm, as a client. A beat, my office, Diane said. 4 o'clock. She was there at 3:55. She told Diane everything, except Ronan's name, which she legally did not have to disclose in an initial attorney consultation, and which she withheld, not to deceive, but because the name was a variable, and the facts were the facts regardless of whose name was attached. Diane listened the way Diane listened, with complete stillness, and the expression of someone running multiple tracks simultaneously. When Evelyn finished, Diane was quiet for 30 seconds. You have documentation showing that a federal cooperating witness has provided fabricated evidence to the DOJ, Diane said. Yes, and this cooperating witness is scheduled to provide a final evidentiary package in approximately 60 hours. Yes, and you believe your name will be included in that package based on your association with the individual under investigation. Yes, and you came to me rather than directly to the federal investigators because walking into a federal building with this documentation without an attorney is how innocent people make themselves look guilty, Evelyn said. And because I trust your judgment, and because if I'm wrong about any of this, I want someone in the room who can tell me. Diane looked at her for a long moment. You're not wrong about any of this, Diane said. Relief moved through her so fast it was almost physical. I'm going to need to see the documentation, Diane said. All of it. Tonight. And I'm going to need the name of the individual under investigation, because I cannot present this material without full disclosure of the source. Evelyn gave her Ronan's name. Diane's expression did not dramatically change, but she wrote it down slowly, which meant she recognized it. He's your source for this documentation, Diane said. He identified the discrepancies, Evelyn said. The documentation itself is verifiable independent of him. If I present this to the DOJ investigator and the discrepancies are as you describe, it raises serious questions about the integrity of their entire case, Diane said. I know. It may end the investigation. I know. And you understand that, standing here in my office, asking me to do this, you are unambiguously choosing a side. I chose it a while ago, Evelyn said. I'm asking you to help me act on it correctly. Diane looked at her for another long moment. This is not the conversation I expected to be having with you, Diane said. No, Evelyn said. Me either. You have worked for me for 2.5 years, Diane said. You have been careful, thorough, and consistently more capable than your title requires. I have never had a reason to question your judgment. She paused. I'm not questioning it now. I'm noting that if I do this, it will be because I believe the documentation supports it, not because of any other consideration. That's exactly why I came to you, Evelyn said. Diane nodded once. Send me the files tonight, she said. I'll review them and make a determination by morning. If the discrepancies are what you say, I'll contact the investigator directly and arrange a meeting. Her name is Sonia Vance, Evelyn said. DOJ Organized Crime, Case Liaison Extension 447. Diane wrote it down. Go home, Diane said. Sleep. Can't. Go home and sleep, Diane said. You've done what you can do today. Let me do the rest. Evelyn went home. She sent the files. She sat in her apartment and looked at the white flowers on the windowsill, still not dead, still holding, and she thought about the sequence of events that had brought her to this specific Monday evening. The dinner, the green dress, the hand against her back, coffee, the notepad, the federal office, the documentation with its 12 marked discrepancies. She thought about choices and what they cost and what they were worth. She texted Ronan, files sent. Diane has it. His reply came in under a minute. Thank you. Then, how are you? She looked at the question. She typed back, ask me Thursday. His reply, Thursday. She turned off the light and lay down in her clothes and did not expect to sleep and was asleep in 4 minutes. Tuesday moved like a held breath. Diane called at 9 in the morning to say she had reviewed the files and the discrepancies were documentable and significant, and that she had placed a call to Sonia Vance's office requesting an urgent meeting. Vance's office called back at 11. The meeting was set for Tuesday afternoon. Evelyn was not present for it. Diane had been clear that her role for now was to exist outside the room because her presence added complication, and Diane's presentation of the material needed to stand on its own credibility. So Evelyn sat at her desk at Merritt, Caldwell, and proofread a contract addendum and answered 3 emails about a deposition schedule and pretended to be a person whose Tuesday was ordinary. Diane came back at 4:30. She knocked on Evelyn's open door and stood in the doorway with her coat still on and her briefcase still in her hand. The expression on her face and the expression on Sideways was the expression of a person who had walked out of a room knowing they had changed something significant. Vance reviewed the documentation, Diane said. She's pulling her cooperating witness. The Thursday filing is canceled. Evelyn breathed in. She's also initiating an internal review of the evidentiary material the witness provided over the last 18 months, Diane continued. It will likely take months. During that review, any case activity built on that material is suspended. My name, Evelyn said, will not appear in any filed material, Diane said. Vance confirmed it directly. She also said, Diane paused, with the expression of someone quoting something they found genuinely unusual, that she hoped you'd find the bar exam less stressful than the last week. Evelyn put her pen down. She put her forehead in her hands. She sat like that for 3 seconds, just 3, and then she straightened up and picked her pen back up because she was at work, and she had a contract addendum in front of her. Thank you, she said. Diane. You can thank me when you pass the exam, Diane said. And then we're going to have a different conversation. She left. Evelyn sat at her desk for another hour finishing the contract addendum, which was the most calming thing she had done in 4 days. At 6 o'clock, she texted Ronan. It's done. Thursday is canceled. She waited. His reply took longer this time. Almost 3 minutes, which was long for him. Then I know. Marcus is being handled. She thought about what handled meant, coming from him in this context. She texted back, legally, a pause. The documentation Diane presented gives Vance grounds to flip the liability. Marcus is currently being contacted by investigators who are offering him a significantly less generous arrangement than the one he thought he had. He will cooperate with the revised terms, because the alternative is considerably worse. She read that twice. He goes to prison, she texted. A version of that, yes. She thought about 9 years. She thought about a man who had stayed when things were burning, and then spent 18 months building toward the moment he could walk away with his hands clean. She thought about what that kind of betrayal felt like from the inside, not the betrayal of the person betrayed, but the long corrosive work of the person doing it. She didn't have sympathy for Marcus Webb. She had something more complicated, then a recognition that the architecture of loyalty and betrayal was never simple, that people who did terrible things to each other almost always had a story they told themselves that made it feel inevitable. She texted, and Grant? The reply came fast this time. Grant Holloway is currently in conversation with a compliance attorney about certain activities he conducted through intermediaries over the last 3 years. He will be occupied with that for some time. He will not be contacting you again. She sat with that. She thought about the dinner, the chandelier light on Celeste's ring. She works reception somewhere downtown, said quietly, confidently, into a room full of people who had no reason to doubt it. She picked up her phone. Wednesday, she typed. Same place. His reply, I'll be there. She put her phone in her bag and shut down her computer and turned off her desk lamp, and she walked out of the office into the Tuesday evening, which smelled like cold air and exhaust, and the first suggestion of rain somewhere overhead. She walked to the subway. She thought about Thursday, not the canceled filing, but the other Thursday, the one that was still coming, the one where she had to sit in a room with an evidence exam and 6 hours of questions about the rules of information, and what could be admitted and what had to be excluded, and what the law decided was real. She was going to pass it. She had always been going to pass it. That was the thing about being a person who did the work. The outcome was not guaranteed, but the direction was. You moved in the direction of the thing you were building toward, and you kept moving, and you did not let the things that tried to stop you become the story. The rain started when she was halfway down the subway stairs, a few drops, then more, the city's standard indifference to human timing, and she kept going down into the underground, where the rain couldn't reach. And the trains ran on their own schedule, and she stood on the platform among the other people standing on platform, and she thought about Wednesday evening. She thought about a corner booth and mismatched chairs, and Cora, who remembered orders without writing them down. Scene. She thought about a man who had told her the truth when lying would have been easier, who had sat in her apartment on a Sunday afternoon and given her everything without managing it first. A sound who had looked at her across a coffee shop table 3 weeks ago with the particular attention of someone who actually saw what they were looking at. She thought about what she was going to say to him on Wednesday. She thought about the conversation they'd agreed to have. Not the managed version, not the careful one. The train came. She got on. And somewhere across the city, in a building that looked exactly like what it was from the outside, and nothing like it from the inside, Ronan Blackwell sat alone in an office and looked at a text message that said Wednesday. Same place, and the thing that crossed his face in the privacy of that room, with no one watching, was not controlled and not managed, and not anything that could be adequately described as the expression of a man who had his situation under control. It was the face of a man who had spent his entire adult life building walls around everything that mattered to him, who had watched those walls protect him and also isolate him, who had kissed a stranger in a restaurant 3 weeks ago on an impulse he could not fully account for, and found himself somehow standing somewhere he had not expected to be. Somewhere that felt, in a way he had no adequate language for, like solid ground. He put his phone face down on the desk. He looked at the wall. He had 72 hours of work still ahead of him, before anything was truly resolved. Marcus, the reorganization, the layers of exposure that needed to be assessed and addressed, now that the DOJ case had been structurally compromised, and he was going to do all of it, methodically and completely, because that was how he had survived everything that had come before. But underneath that, running quietly and without apology, was the thought of Wednesday evening. The back corner booth. The mismatched chair. The woman who had sat across from him with her hands around a coffee cup and said, "I'm not walking away," and meant it, and proved it, and had not once in 3 weeks given him any reason to doubt that she was exactly who she appeared to be. He had not had that before. He had not known how much it weighed, the absence of it, until something put it on the scale. Picked up the phone again. He started the work. And in 72 hours, when the work was done and the cleared space was visible and the ground had been confirmed as solid enough to stand on, he was going to walk into a coffee shop on the corner that had been there for 30 years, a sound like green wood splitting, and he was going to sit across from Evelyn Hartwell, and he was going to have the conversation he had promised her. The real one. Not the managed version. All of it. Whatever came after that, he would face it the same way he had faced everything that had tried to break him directly, and without looking away. He just had not, until very recently, expected to face it with someone beside him. He found that he was not afraid of it. That, more than anything else that had happened in the last 3 weeks, was the thing that told him something had genuinely changed. Wednesday came the way endings always did without announcement, wearing the same face as every other day. Evelyn woke at 6:15 to rain against the window, the kind that wasn't heavy enough to be dramatic but was consistent enough to mean something. And she lay still for a moment listening to it before she got up. She made coffee. She stood at the kitchen counter and looked at the white flowers on the windowsill, which had finally begun to go at the edges, not dead, but past their best, holding on in that particular way of things that had lasted longer than expected and knew it. She had a bar prep session scheduled for 9. She went. She sat in the study room she'd been using for 14 months and worked through 2 practice sets on hearsay exceptions and got through both of them without second-guessing herself once, which she took as information. Her instincts were good. They had always been good. She had spent a long time doubting them in the specific targeted way that happened when you spent enough time around a person who treated your certainty as something to be quietly managed down. She was done with that. She finished at noon, ate lunch at the small Vietnamese place on the corner that she had been going to for 3 years, and spent the afternoon doing something she almost never allowed herself, nothing in particular. She walked, not with a destination, just through the city, which was doing what it always did in November, pulling its shoulder up against the wind and continuing regardless. She walked through the park and along the west side and back east through the 30s, and she let her mind do what minds did when you stopped directing them, which was arrive at the things you'd been circling. She thought about Marcus Webb. Ronan had texted Tuesday night brief, factual. Marcus has been formally re-engaged by federal investigators under revised terms. His original immunity agreement is void. He has accepted a cooperation agreement that requires full disclosure in exchange for a reduced but significant sentence. He confirmed the fabrication of evidence. Vance has it on record. She had read it 3 times. 9 years. The man had spent 9 years inside something, had helped build it from wreckage into something that functioned, and had then spent 18 months carefully, methodically taking it apart from the inside. She had thought about that a great deal in the last 2 days, not because she felt sympathy for him, but because she was trying to understand the internal geometry of it. The moment where loyalty became arithmetic. The calculation that said my survival matters more than this, and the long, corroding work of acting on that calculation while continuing to show up every day as though nothing had changed. She understood the arithmetic. She didn't understand how you lived inside it for 18 months without it eating through you. Maybe it had. Maybe that was the part that never made the case file. She walked until 4:30, which was later than she'd intended, and then she went home and changed out of her walking clothes into jeans and a dark sweater and her good coat, and she sat on the edge of her bed for a moment, with her hands in her lap, and looked at the wall. She had told Ronan they were going to have a real conversation on Wednesday. She had meant it. She was also aware, sitting on the edge of her bed at 4:45 in the afternoon, that real conversations were the ones that couldn't be prepared for the same way you prepared for depositions and practice exams. You could know what you wanted to say. You couldn't know what would happen after you said it. Picked up her coat and her keys, and she went. Marin's was busy for a Wednesday, which surprised her 4 tables occupied instead of the usual 2, a couple near the window she'd never seen before, and Cora behind the counter moving with the particular efficiency of someone managing more than their usual load. Evelyn took the back corner booth, which was available because it was always available for her on Wednesdays at this point, and she didn't examine too closely what it meant that Cora had started holding it. She ordered coffee. She waited. Ronan came through the door at 7 exactly, which was the most consistent thing about him, the punctuality, the scan of the room, the directness of his movement toward her. He looked different tonight in a way she couldn't immediately locate. Same kind of suit, same quality of presence. Something underneath it was different. Something about the way he was carrying himself, not lighter exactly, but less compressed. Like a pressure that had been running at a constant level for a very long time had been reduced by some incremental but significant amount. He sat. He looked at her. She looked at him. For a moment, neither of them said anything, which was unusual for two people who had always, from the first night, moved fairly quickly to substance. Marcus gave his full statement yesterday, he said. I know, you texted. I wanted to say it out loud, he said. There's a difference. What does it mean for your organization? He was quiet for a moment. It means that 18 months of his intelligence has to be audited against what actually happened. Some of what he fed them was accurate. The portions he fabricated were strategic, designed to fill specific evidentiary gaps that the real material couldn't fill. Identifying what's real and what isn't is it's going to take time. And for you personally, legally, the case Vance was building collapses without the fabricated material tying it together, he said. The real material shows organizational activity, but nothing with sufficient personal attribution at my level to sustain a direct prosecution. She knows it. She's not happy about it, but she knows it. She's not going to stop, Evelyn said. No, he agreed. She's not. She'll rebuild. She's patient and she's good, and she will find another approach eventually. How long enough? He said. Years, probably. If I'm still operating the same way when she gets there. She looked at him. What does that mean? He picked up his coffee. He held it for a moment without drinking. I've been thinking about something you said, he said. The first night at this table. You said that the people around you weren't always safe. That your name meant something in rooms I wouldn't want to be in. I remember. I said it without thinking too carefully about what it would mean to someone on the other side, he said. What it would mean to have that information and stay anyway. I stayed anyway, she said. I know. He set the cup down. I've been trying to understand why, and I've arrived at the conclusion that I understand it. That you are a person who weighs things carefully and acts on her own assessment and doesn't need anyone to validate the weight she's assigned to something, and also that it's the most significant thing anyone has done for me in a very long time, and I don't want to manage that away into something smaller than it is. Coffee shop moved around them. Cora taking an order at the counter, the couple by the window leaning toward each other, over something on a phone. The city pressing against the glass. I need to tell you something, Evelyn said. And I need you to hear it, the way I mean it, not the way it might sound. All right? I didn't stay because I wasn't afraid, she said. I was afraid. I am afraid in specific ways of specific things about your world and what it means to be near it. That fear is real and it hasn't gone away. I know. And I didn't stay because I thought I could change you, she said. I didn't walk into this thinking I was going to be the person who made a dangerous man decide to become something different. That's not what I believed, and it's not what I wanted. What did you want? He said. She looked at him directly. I wanted to stop making decisions out of fear, she said. I spent 3 years making decisions out of fear. Fear of being wrong again, fear of what it would mean if I trusted someone, and it cost me. And I looked at you across this table and I understood that staying had a cost and leaving also had a cost. And for once I wanted to choose the thing that was real rather than the thing that was safe. He was very still. You're real, she said. Whatever else you are. That night in the restaurant, you saw what was happening, and you made a decision and you didn't ask for anything back. That's real. The way you listened the first night is real. The way you told me the truth about what you were when you didn't have to is real. I'm also a man who runs a criminal organization, he said. I know what you are, she said. I have known what you are since the first time I asked. And you're telling me that's acceptable to you. I'm telling you it's real to me, she said. Acceptable is a word for evaluating something from a distance. I'm not at a distance, he breathed out slowly. It was the kind of exhale that came from somewhere deep, from a held place, the breath of a person who had been carrying something at a consistent level of effort for so long that the act of setting it down was almost physical. I told you I'd been making changes, he said. You mentioned separating your legitimate operations from the rest, she said. You mentioned it the first time at this table, obliquely. I noticed. I've been working toward it for about a year, he said. Before you. It's a slow process. The criminal infrastructure of what I inherited doesn't disentangle from the legitimate parts like pulling thread it's woven in. It has relationships and obligations and people whose livelihoods are tied to it. You can't walk away from it in a day without destroying the people who've built their lives inside it. But you can walk away eventually, she said. Eventually, he said. If I do it right. If I do it in a way that doesn't create a vacuum that fills with something worse, and doesn't leave the people who've been loyal to me, the ones who aren't Marcus, the ones who are genuinely loyal, exposed. How long? Honestly, he looked at his hands. 2 years. Maybe 3. If everything goes the way I need it to go, and if I'm careful, and if I have a reason to be more invested in getting there than I've previously been. She understood what he was saying. She understood what he was not saying, which was louder. I'm not going to be your reason, she said. You understand that? He looked at her. I mean that, she said. You don't get to make me the reason. That's too much weight to put on another person, and it's too convenient. It means if something goes wrong, if the timeline slips, you can look at the relationship and call it complicated and stay where you are. I've seen what it looks like when someone uses another person as the reason they're going to change. It never works. The change has to be yours. I know, he said. Do you? I've known it for a long time, he said. The decision to move towards something different started before you. You are not the reason. You are, he stopped, and she watched him search for something that wasn't managed, that didn't have the polish of the careful language he usually deployed. You are the person who makes me want to have gotten there, he said. That's different. She sat with that. It was different. She recognized that it was different. Okay, she said. He looked at her. Okay. Wednesday evening, she said. Same place. And I want honesty, the same kind you've been giving me since the coffee shop. Not better and not worse. Yes. And when things happen that involve me, I hear about them when you do. Not after. Agreed. I've already agreed to that. I know. I'm saying it again because I need it to be a standing condition, not a promise you made once under pressure. It's a standing condition, he said. She nodded. They stayed another hour. They talked about her bar exam 12 days out, which was close enough to feel real and far enough to still be a collection of abstract categories rather than an imminent event. He asked about the areas she was least confident in, and she told him. And he asked questions that helped her articulate what she actually understood versus what she was covering with memorization, which was a distinction that mattered. She told him about a call she'd gotten that afternoon from Dana, who had heard through Marcus, which had a particular irony that Evelyn was involved in something significant and who had called worried and needed reassurance. The call had been brief. Dana was not stupid and understood when she was being given the version of a story that was as complete as it was going to get. She'll ask again eventually, Evelyn said. What will you tell her? The truth, when I can, she said. The version of it she can actually use. He nodded. When they left, he walked her to the subway again. The rain had stopped while they were inside, and the sidewalk was wet and reflecting the streetlights in long orange streaks. The cold had the quality of late November, the kind that settled into your coat collar and stayed there. At the top of the subway stairs, she stopped and turned. The exam is in 12 days, she said. I know. I'm going to be unreachable for the 10 days before it, she said. Not personally, professionally and mentally. It needs to be the only thing. I understand that, he said. And after, she said. When you pass, he said. I want to go somewhere that isn't a coffee shop, she said. Somewhere that isn't a dinner party or a deposition or a federal building. Somewhere that's just somewhere. He looked at her with that expression she had catalogued, the one that was not managed, that did not pass through any filter before it arrived. I'll find somewhere, he said. Somewhere quiet, she said. Quiet, he agreed. She went down the stairs. She did not look back this time either, and this time it didn't take any effort at all. 10 days that followed were the most focused she had been in 2 years. Cleared her kitchen table of everything except study materials. She slept 7 hours a night, which was more than her usual, because she had read that consolidation happened in sleep, and she was going to use every available mechanism. She ate actual meals at actual times. She ran every morning, 4 miles, The route she knew well enough that her mind could be somewhere else, while her body did the work. She thought sound constitution and professional's responsibility. And she thought about the professional responsibility section specifically with a kind of particular attention, because professional responsibility was the section about what lawyers owed to the system they operated in. And she had spent the last month existing in the space where that system was alive and complicated, and not at all the clean architecture of a textbook. She had not compromised her professional responsibility. She was certain of it. She had brought legitimate evidence of fabricated evidence to a licensed attorney who had presented it through proper channels. Every step had been legal. Every action had been defensible. She was also aware that she had been motivated, at least in part, by the desire to protect a man who ran a criminal organization, and that the law did not particularly care about motivations when the actions were correct, but that she would have to live with the full picture regardless of what the law said about it. She lived with it. She made her peace with it on day 4 of the 10, sitting at her kitchen table at 11 at night, with a civil procedure outline in front of her, and the weight of the last month settled somewhere in her chest like something that had arrived and decided to stay. Not a bad weight, not a comfortable one. The weight of a person who had made choices with full information and was not going to pretend otherwise. She had chosen Ronan Blackwell, not because he was safe, not because it was wise, because he was real, and because she was done choosing things based primarily on what they cost her rather than what they were worth. A sound like green wood splitting, and because she had looked at a man who told her the truth when lying was, and decided that was the thing she had been waiting for, without knowing she was waiting for it. She would have to keep choosing him every day with full awareness of what that meant. She was prepared to do that. She closed the outline and went to bed. Exam was on a Thursday. She arrived at the testing center at 7:45 for an 8 o'clock start. She wore the same charcoal blazer she'd worn to the federal office because it was the most serious thing she owned, and she had decided it was now her armor. She had her ID and her pencils and nothing else, because nothing else was permitted. She sat in the testing room among 200 other people who all had the same compressed, slightly haunted expression of people who had been preparing for this specific moment for long enough that its arrival felt both inevitable and impossible. And she put her pencils on the desk and her hands in her lap, and she breathed in and she breathed out. She thought about the first instinct rule. She thought about Ronan asking, "What would you have answered?" First instinct. She thought about the answer being right. The proctor said begin. She began. The exam lasted 2 days, 1 day for the multi-state bar examination, the second for the New York essays. At the end of the second day, she walked out of the testing center into the cold afternoon air and stood on the sidewalk for a long moment with her eyes closed, feeling the specific physical sensation of something massive having passed through her and left her standing. Not knowing yet, not for weeks, but standing, she opened her eyes. She took out her phone. She had one text from Ronan, sent that morning at 7:50, first instinct. She smiled. She typed back, done. His reply came in 30 seconds, dinner. Not coffee. Tell me when. She typed tomorrow. He sent an address she didn't recognize, and a time 7 o'clock and nothing else, which was exactly the right amount of information, and she recognized that he had understood what she meant by somewhere quiet. She took the subway home and slept for 11 hours. The restaurant was in a neighborhood she didn't know well, not the kind of place that advertised, not the kind that appeared in lists. A narrow frontage on a side street in the West Village, a handwritten menu in the window, warm light through the glass. The kind of place that had been there long enough to stop caring whether anyone found it. She arrived at 7. He was already inside, which was the first time he'd arrived before her, and he was sitting at a corner table, not the back corner this time, but a window table, where the street was visible and the light came through softly, and he stood when she came in. She sat across from him. He looked at her the way he had looked at her that first night, from across a restaurant, when she had turned and found him already looking, with that specific attention, that quality of actually seeing what was in front of him, rather than what he expected to be there. "How do you feel?" he said. "Like I've been running at full capacity for 6 weeks, And someone just cut the power, she said. That's what the end of a very long effort feels like, he said. How would you know? I've had a few, he said. She believed him. They ordered. The food was simple and good, the kind of cooking that had decided it didn't need to impress you and was right. A sound like green wood splitting. She had pasta with something brown buttered and complicated that she didn't try to identify. And he had something with fish that he ate with the methodical attention of a man who had finally gotten to sit down. They talked through dinner the way they always talked, lateral, specific, real. She told him about the essay section, the question that had surprised her, and the way she'd found her angle into it. He told her that Marcus Webb had entered a guilty plea in federal court that morning, which had not been in any of the news she'd caught, but which he knew about through the kind of channels that knew these things before anyone reported them. How do you feel about that? She said. He considered it honestly. Complicated, he said. I trusted him. That trust was real. What he did with it doesn't change that the trust was real. It just means the thing I trusted wasn't the thing I thought it was. That's a specific kind of loss. He paused. I've been examining how I missed it. 18 months. I've been going back through the last year and a half looking for the places I should have seen it. And there were places, he said, moments that, in retrospect, were signals I read differently than I should have. I explained them in ways that were convenient. That's not a comfortable thing to admit. No, she said. I've operated for a long time on the assumption that I could read people accurately, he said. Marcus has introduced some significant doubt into that assumption. That's not necessarily a bad thing, she said. Certainty about your own judgment is not the same as having good judgment. No, he agreed. It isn't. I spent 3 years thinking Grant's assessment of me was accurate, she said, because he was confident about it. And then I spent another 3 years rebuilding the understanding that his confidence didn't make it true. He looked at her. You're telling me something, he said. I'm telling you that discovering you're capable of being wrong about something important is not the end of being capable, she said. It's uncomfortable. It's supposed to be. That's how it changes you. Quiet for a moment. You're going to be very good at this, he said. The law, he said, the actual practice of it. Not just the exam. She looked at him. Why? Because you understand that the argument matters less than what's true, he said. Most people who are good at argument lose sight of that, eventually. You haven't. You might not. She sat with that. It meant more than she would have expected it to, coming from him. Not because she needed his assessment to validate her own, but because he was not a person who said things for the sake of saying them, and she had learned to hear his words at face value. Thank you, she said. He nodded. After dinner they walked. It had become cold enough that their breath was visible, and the West Village streets were quiet in the way they got on weekday evenings. In November, the earlier crowds gone, and the night settling into a more honest version of itself. They walked without direction, which was new. Every other time they'd moved through the city, it had been with a destination. This felt different, easier. She told him about Dana. She called again, yesterday, Evelyn said. She'd heard from Marcus that something significant happened, and she didn't know the details, but she knew he was in serious trouble. She was scared. How is she? She's holding, Evelyn said. Marcus is cooperating, which means his sentence may be reduced, which means there's a future that doesn't involve him in federal prison for the rest of his life. It's not the life she thought she was building, but it's a version of a life. I'm sorry for what happened to her, he said. Whatever Marcus did to me, what he did to her is a separate thing. I know, Evelyn said. She knows that too, I think. Eventually, they walked another block. Grant is gone, he said. Not a question. He hasn't contacted me since Monday 3 weeks ago, she said. Whatever his compliance attorney told him, it worked. He's going to be dealing with the consequences of his business activities for some time, Ronan said. Not prison. The exposure isn't sufficient for that, but enough to keep him focused on his own situation. And Celeste? I don't know, he said. That's not something I tracked. She thought about Celeste, the careful smile at the dinner, the diamond that had probably seemed like a statement and turned out to be a question. She found she didn't have anything in particular against Celeste Whitmore. The woman had chosen a man who was fundamentally more interested in the appearance of things than in the substance of them. And she was going to arrive at that understanding either gradually or all at once. And either way, it was going to be her own reckoning to make. Everyone eventually arrived at their own reckoning. That was something she had learned in the last month, more clearly than she had ever learned it before. They stopped at a corner. Across the street, a dry cleaner's sign glowed orange-red in the dark, the only thing open on the block. The wind moved through with a particular cold specificity, the kind that found the gap at the back of your collar and stayed there. She turned toward him. "I want to ask you something," she said. "And I want you to tell me if you don't have an answer yet." "That's an acceptable answer." "Ask," he said. "What does this look like in a year?" she said. "Not perfectly. Not a plan. Just what do you see when you look toward it?" He was quiet for a moment, but it was not the quiet of someone avoiding the question. It was the quiet of someone taking it seriously enough to answer honestly. "I see myself further along the process of separating the legitimate from the rest," he said. "I see the people who've been with me through that process, stabilized financially, legally. I see the exposure reduced to a point where the decisions I'm making aren't made under the same level of threat. And personally, I see Wednesday evenings," he said. "Different restaurants, sometimes. The same conversations. I see you having passed the exam and having the conversation with Diane about your future at the firm." "I see," he stopped. "Say it," she said. "I see someone I can be honest with," he said. "Fully. Not a managed version of honesty, not the truth I've decided you're ready for. Someone who has already proven she can hold the full weight of what I am and stay standing. I don't take that lightly." She looked at him. "That's not a small thing," she said. "No," he said. "It's not." The wind moved again. She pulled her coat closer. "I'm going to need you to be patient with me," she said, "on the things that are still hard. The fear I've told you about, it's real, and it's mine, and I'm not going to perform the absence of it to make anything easier. Some days it's going to be present, and I'm going to need you to not manage it away." "I won't manage it," he said. "And some days I'm going to need to tell you that something is wrong and have you hear it without turning it into a situation to be handled," she said. "Tell me what that looks like," he said, "so I recognize it." She thought about it. "It looks like me saying I need you to just listen, and you not immediately trying to fix it," she said. He nodded slowly. "I can do that. It won't always come naturally." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm telling you in advance." He looked at her with the expression she had first seen on the night they left the coffee shop, the first time, the one that was not managed, the one that existed in the space before the filter, and she understood that this was what he actually looked like when he wasn't performing anything for anyone. This was the face underneath the face, the one that almost nobody ever saw. She had seen it before. She saw it now. She reached out and took his hand. He looked down at her hand in his. He had large hands, and she felt the way his closed around hers, careful, not tentative, the grip of someone who understood what they were holding and intended to hold it correctly. "Somewhere quiet," she said, remembering what she'd asked for. "This is quiet," he said. She looked around. The empty street, the orange glow of the dry cleaner's sign, their breath in the cold air. The city at a volume where you could hear yourself think. "It is," she said. They stood there for a moment. Then she said, "Walk me to the subway?" And he did. They walked without hurrying, which was the thing she had not expected about him, that, for a man who moved through the world with such directness and purpose, he could also simply walk beside someone at their pace, without any apparent need to be moving faster toward the next thing. At the top of the stairs, she stopped. She turned toward him one more time. "When the results come," she said. "I'll be wherever you want me to be," he said. She believed that too. She went down the stairs. The results came 6 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning in January, in an email from the New York State Board of Law Examiners that she opened at her kitchen table with both hands, wrapped around her coffee cup, and her heart moving at a pace she could feel in her throat. She read it twice. Then she sat very still for a moment, with the winter light coming through the kitchen window, and the city doing its ordinary Tuesday morning things outside, and the white flowers long gone from the windowsill, replaced now by something green and persistent that Ronan had brought on a Wednesday evening 3 weeks back, and that had improbably taken hold. She picked up her phone. She called him. He answered on the first ring. "Well," he said. "I passed," she said. The silence on the line lasted 2 seconds. "I know," he said. "You couldn't have... I've known since October," he said. "I just had to wait for you to find out." She laughed a real laugh, the kind that came from somewhere that hadn't been used in a long time, and she pressed her hand against her mouth and looked at the ceiling of her kitchen. "Where are you?" she said. "Outside," he said. She got up. She went to the window. He was standing across the street, phone to his ear, looking up at her building. No car behind him, no visible security. Just a man standing on a sidewalk in January, his breath visible in the cold air, looking up. He saw her in the window. He raised one hand. She pressed her palm flat against the glass. She buzzed him up. He came through the door of her apartment with the cold, from outside still on his coat, and she was already across the room. And they met somewhere in the middle, not gracefully, not smoothly, but the way actual things happen between actual people, with a slight miscalculation of space and a brief moment of adjustment, and then the full, real, unmanaged fact of it. He held on. She held on. Outside, the city continued in its total indifferent way, the traffic and the pedestrians and the delivery trucks and the dry cleaners and the coffee shops that had been on the same corner for 30 years. The city did not stop for any of this. It never did. But somewhere inside it, in an apartment on the 4th floor with winter light coming through the windows and something green growing on the windowsill, two imperfect people who had found each other in the wreckage of difficult things stood in the middle of a room and did not let go. And the woman who had walked into a dinner party 3 months earlier in an emerald green dress, trying to survive one uncomfortable evening and go home, understood finally and completely that this was what she had been building toward, not the exam, not the career, not the validation of any single moment. This the decision, made with full information, to stay. She had always been capable of it. She had needed to remember that she was. She remembered now,